Hey friends, welcome back to the Christian Music Industry Podcast. I'm your friend in the industry, Wisdom Moon, and today I have a special guest, Madyson Kohl. Welcome, Madyson.
Hey guys.
So you may be wondering, who is Madyson?
Who am I?
Because you may have never heard of her, except for like her last name. You know, you may be familiar with the store,
The department store.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, my name's Madyson, and I moved to Nashville last year. I graduated from Liberty University with a songwriting degree. And I initially moved here to Nashville to do the songwriting thing. And I had a publishing internship at Tim. And so that's how I ended up getting...
You're saying a lot of things that people are like, what is that? Tim, is that your friend?
Yes, my friend Tim. No, I had an internship at a publishing company called Tim Publishing. So that's Chris Tomlin and Jason Ingram's publishing company.
So it's not like your friend Tim?
No, not my friend Tim.
Or Tim Horton or whatever.
No. And Stacey Wilbur, she manages, or she
basically runs it.
Yeah, she runs it.
Yeah.
And so I was working under her. And I think you had asked her about, like, a reference for a job.
I asked her, like, do you know any crazy people that want to do crazy things?
Well, because you were looking for an operations manager for your label. And so she recommended me, which, looking back, feels so crazy because I was only interning for 2 weeks there. And so for her to recommend me was really sweet. And for you to hire me also made no sense because I had absolutely no experience in operations or music business or a music label in general. So I started with you doing operations at Lula last summer.
And I was remote. You were here, but I was virtual in Kansas. So.
It was remote. So not only did I know nothing, but I didn't even really know you. And so that was an interesting summer because I was basically doing the same job twice, kind of. So I was doing a lot of administration for Tim Publishing and then doing administration for Lula Street, and I had absolutely no idea what I was doing. And so that you moved, when did you move to Nashville?
August 2024.
Yeah, so that was really helpful, I think, to start doing more things in person because just learned so much better.
And you realize like I'm an actual real person, not like AI or something.
Exactly. And so I think it was around the fall you had asked me if I wanted to do full-time admin, and I was like, absolutely not. And then come like wintertime, I started talking to you about being interested in A&R, and then there was like an opening at Pure Mosaic Records to do A&R and publishing, which I started in January. So currently, I am operations manager at Lula Street Records, A&R publishing coordinator at Pure Mosaic Records, and
you help with management.
Yeah, your right hand for like Lula Music Group management stuff.
Yeah.
And now I'm on the podcast.
Yeah, you're just kind of taking over everything I'm doing, it seems like.
Basically, everywhere wisdom is, you'll find me.
Yeah. Yeah. So this was a part of her contract. She said, I have to be on this podcast or I quit.
Yeah, so exactly.
That's why she's here. Also, it's Madyson with the Y.
Yeah, Madyson.
Which is like pretty rare. I've never seen that before.
Me neither.
Was that like a spelling error on the birth certificate? Like what happened?
No, I don't know. I don't know why my mom spelled it that way. So my name will be on all the keychains at the gas station, but never spelled right. So
at least you can find keychains. I can't find keychains. I always try, and I can't find it.
Yeah, that's sad.
Yeah,
I'm sorry about that.
So we're gonna be doing some of these episodes where basically we're gonna do some Q&A. You get to ask questions. So Madyson's gonna read questions. I'm gonna try to answer them. They say that advice is worth what you paid for. So just keep that in mind. This is a free podcast. I think you coming in really fresh into the industry, It's helpful to have like a different perspective.
Totally.
So, I would love for you to speak into things. Also, before we get into the Q&A, you said something about you moved to Nashville to do the songwriting thing. So is that what people just can do? Like, just move here and just be like, I'm going to do the songwriting thing, and then it just works out? Like,
well, yes and no. I think I've realized a lot since moving here, but I truly felt called by the Lord to move here, which sounds like a cheesy answer because I feel like that's what everyone says, but I got a lot of confirmation. And so when I moved here, pretty much the only thing I had was that internship with Tim. And I knew that I wanted to be a songwriter. And so that feels really frightening to move here and not really know anybody or have really much of an into the industry. But so I think when I got roped in with you, that was such an answered prayer. But I had no intention really of being in the music business.
I remember.
Yeah. So that was kind of just a part-time job that I could do with the internship that could help pay some bills while I was also doing songwriting. And then I just realized how much I love music business. And so I'm still songwriting, and what that looks like, I mean, it looks different than maybe I thought. I think now working in music business, which is something I really didn't know I would love, has taken the pressure off songwriting paying my bills. But also, it's a little different because I didn't come here to be an artist. I knew that moving here that I wasn't pursuing artistry. Yeah. I wanted to pursue songwriting. And I think I've learned more and more that it's even harder if you're not wanting to be an artist, just a songwriter, to really make a living off of that. And so it's been such a gift from God to be involved in the industry in all these different ways and then still be able to songwrite and walk with artists and songwriters, but not be like, oh, this has to pay my bills and I have to do this. So I think it looks different for everyone. But I think what I found is I felt frustrated in pursuing songwriting as the career because it felt like there's a million people trying to fit this one small gap. Versus like the music business, I feel like there's so much need for people to support these artists. And I just like wanted to walk in that need more. So
how did you find the internship at Tim Publishing?
It was through a friend. So I had a friend at school who did the internship the summer previously. And so I just asked her about it, and she recommended Tim Publishing. They really work a lot for internships based off of recommendations. So she had recommended me, and I applied for the summer in like November. So I think I was way ahead of the game. And so I already had gotten the internship in December, like really quickly. So I think I was just the first person to reach out, and then the person who recommended me, they really liked. So
cool. So another practical thing, because every day there's 123 artists, songwriters moving to Nashville. No, I just made that up.
I was like, what?
But there's a lot of people moving to Nashville to pursue music. You know, there's probably actually more than that. I feel like every day. So let's talk about some practical things. So you got the internship,
right?
How did you know where you were going to live, and how did you figure that out?
That was where God miraculously came in. So initially I was planning to stay at my school and get a master's in theology.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So that was so different. But I had an opportunity to get a master's for free. And so that was what I was doing and planning to stay. And then I just like couldn't get Nashville out of my heart. And I felt that I was staying at school because it was comfortable and just available. So I started pursuing what it would look like to move there, and that's when I asked my friend about the internship, and then I applied and got the internship in December before I even knew if I was able to move or could move or had a roommate. And so I was just asking the Lord for confirmation if he wanted me to move. And then a friend of a friend that I barely knew called me because she said she felt the Lord tell her to call me.
Oh.
And we just started talking, and she was living in Nashville at the time. She had gone to school with me, but graduated a few years before me. And she never even came to my mind because I didn't know her very well, and she already had roommates in a living situation. But she just called me and was just asking how I was doing and like asking to pray for me. And then towards the end of the call, she mentioned that she needed prayer because she was looking for a roommate. And I was like, when are you looking for a roommate? And she said, in May. And I was like, Estella, this sounds crazy, but I'm considering moving to Nashville in May for an internship.
Wow.
And I'm looking for a roommate and I'm wanting to live in Franklin. And that was exactly what she was looking for. And so honestly, everything just kind of fell together, which I feel the more that I hear people's testimonies of coming here feels like an anomaly, because I just felt like God opened all these doors for me. And I know that's not everyone's experience, because I've met some girls my age who have told me they just moved to Nashville, and I'm like, great, like, where are you working? Where are you living at? And they're like, oh, I'm at a hotel, like, I don't have a job. Like, I'm just, some girl at my church stayed in an Airbnb for a month because she felt God call her to move here.
Wow.
And didn't have a job and didn't have a place to stay. And she's like, I just need to move here and I'll figure it out.
Had a lot of money.
Yeah, no, sometimes it does take, I will say my parents did help me with the transition. And so that was such a big blessing. But yeah, it was literally the Lord.
Wow. Yeah, that does sound like outside the norm a little bit. But God does work in mysterious ways. I mean, you know, I have a lot of that, like, in my personal testimony too in the music industry. So that's awesome. And yeah, thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's see what questions we have. These are questions that were sent in, and we'll let you know at the end, like, how you can submit your questions. So yeah.
Cool. Let's get started. Question number 1. Hey, Wisdom. Thank you for everything you do to help independent Christian musicians. I've just reached my Kickstarter campaign goal of $18,000. About $12,000 has been allocated already for recording, production, mixing, and mastering. How do you think I should best invest the remaining $6,000?
This almost sounds like one of those, like, math problems in school. I hated math in school. I'm like, wait, how much?
Those, like, word
left?
Problems where they're like, you have 12 bananas. So how many apples do you have?
Get my calculator out. But first of all, that's really awesome. Congrats on that, because that is not a small feat. And I feel like that takes a lot of work to, you know, really, like, be able to share your vision of what you're wanting to do. Because also, people are kind of, like, burnt out on Kickstarter campaigns and, you know, crowdfunding. So the fact that you are doing this in 2025 is pretty crazy.
Seriously, that's true.
How much money you were able to raise. So I would say really you want to focus on how can I best steward this to make the greatest impact. And a lot of that takes strategy. And I think strategy is sometimes overlooked by Christians because we tend to over spiritualize things. And I've heard so many artists say, like, well, as long as I just put out music, God's gonna, you know, make it be heard by whoever he wants to hear it. Or people will say, well, God told me to release this, so I'm just trusting that everybody on earth will hear this music. In a lot of ways, it's like really bad stewardship to think that way, and it's unhealthy to think that way. It's not biblical to think that way. And even just practically speaking, even the biggest artists on earth, not everybody's heard their music, even though they're spending millions of dollars to market it, like Taylor Swift. There are, you know, you may not believe this, but there are people on earth that have never heard of her name or her songs. So, and I say that because I've literally heard artists tell me this, and they weren't joking when they told me this, that they want every single person on earth to hear their music. And like, not even every person has heard the gospel yet. So that's a pretty tall order for God to do that for you. So I want to share some practical things. And, you know, I think it also kind of, you know, the best advice I would be able to give in this situation is like actually talking to the person. But I'm going to give some general guidelines to help, you know, everybody listening. So I would allocate maybe half of that towards marketing, and marketing as in like actual paid campaigns. So that could be Instagram ads, Spotify showcase or marquee or Spotify ads. I talk to artists almost every week that have like never used Spotify showcase or marquee. So I think that's something really, I just talked to an artist yesterday, and she had, some marketing budget she was trying to figure out. And so I recommended Showcase because she didn't have marquee available on her Spotify for artists. And she had never done it before. And she was like, oh, so this is something you think is worth it, So I wouldn't spend like a ton of money on it. But if you have a release coming up and you can actually schedule these campaigns on Spotify for artists, I would go in and schedule it as soon as your song is available on Spotify for artists as an upcoming release. So when you're going in there to pitch your song, also basically schedule your marquee or showcase campaign, because I have not found this online anywhere, but I have a suspicion that when editorial curators are looking at pitches, they also look at your campaigns that you've set up. So it may help you.
That would make sense.
Yeah, this is just my theory. And yeah, I don't think there's anything I've seen where I can like say for sure, but and the other platform I think that's really a great platform right now is YouTube. If you have videos that you're posting on YouTube, so running ads on YouTube, typically I would say if you just target US with YouTube ads and you have a pretty high quality video, like a music video, lyric video, performance video, you could get a view for 5 cents per view or less. If you target other countries as well, you could get it to 1 cent or sometimes half a cent. So the ROI, return on investment, is pretty good on YouTube, I would say. TikTok is also a good platform for running ads if you're wanting to grow like followers or just get more eyeballs on your content. But I mentioned Instagram. I think doing campaigns where you're running ads on Instagram to grow your followers with good content. I think good content is really key in all of this. I would say, focus on those kind of platforms. I think the good thing about all of these platforms is they give you data after you finish a campaign or as you're running the campaign. It will show you how well the campaign is doing or did. Right. And you can make decisions based on that. Whereas sometimes you run ads on like some website or something and you don't really know the numbers, and they don't really show you numbers and things like that. So that's very basic, general 3,000 out of 6, right? Yeah, 6,000 towards marketing and promotion. And then I would take maybe 1,500 to 2,000 and invest it towards visual content. So that could be hiring somebody to create short form content for you for Instagram, TikTok, YouTube Shorts. And I think there is just really good evidence to show that it's really important to have high quality content on social media and mixed with just organic like iPhone type of content. And I don't think you should just have one or the other.
Right.
So hiring somebody to do that if you don't have the equipment, and then doing music videos, lyric videos, cover art. If you don't know how to design good cover art, hire somebody to do that. Photo shoot. I know that if you don't have budget, you could try to get by with like taking a selfie with your iPhone for your cover art. But since you have, a budget for allocating to things, I would hire a photographer. So yeah, I think those things are really worth investing into because the visual aspect is so important these days for artists. So and then I would say maybe about 500 towards creating merch, just a small batch of merch, whether that's t-shirts, hats, trinkets like keychains or stickers. Oh, keychains, like we talked about. So you could do like a Madyson with a Y keychain,
You could finally make Wisdom's keychain for him.
Yes. Yeah. If you do, send me one. Depending on your audience's demographic, maybe CDs. So if your audience leans towards, I would say like 50 plus, because I'm 44, I don't have a CD player.
I don't either.
I mean, I know people like around my age that still listen to the radio and listen to CDs in their car and stuff. So yeah, maybe like late 40s and up. If that's a core audience you have, CDs could do really well. And then kind of tying in with that is doing a really cool release party or a release concert, maybe at your church or a local venue, and investing some money into that to make it feel really special. Instead of just like having people show up and you do your songs, but maybe invest into decor and, you know, maybe like a backdrop where people can do selfies with your album cover or whatever, you know. And then the way merch ties into that is you can sell merch at the event. Also, you didn't mention this, so I don't know what your plan is, but with Kickstarter, you have perks that you're promising people, and sometimes that takes money. So make sure you have money allocated for that, because I've also heard of horror stories of artists doing a Kickstarter and promising all these perks and then never delivering on them. I've actually experienced it myself.
Was it the
supported
keychain?
it. Yeah, it was a personalized wisdom keychain. I'm so bitter about that. So that's really why I'm bringing this up. But yeah, I supported an artist one time and never got the perks that were promised. Kind of like never heard from them again, actually.
That's awful.
It is awful because now that artist lost my trust.
Right.
And I will never support them again because they never even did the project. That's a whole nother episode.
Oh my goodness!
I think that is something.
So basically,
to definitely talk
make
about.
sure you actually release your music.
Yeah, for sure. So
that's good.
Yeah, that's a really great question, though, and I think for those of you who are going like, how do I afford, you know, to record a Kickstarter and things like that? It could be a viable option, especially if you have core people that will support you. So.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think all of that is super helpful. I think I've found, too, people really underestimate cover art. It's really like a book. Like, I'm gravitated towards books with better covers. It's just like the truth. Yeah. And so since there's so much music out there, when I'm looking at different playlists, the first thing I'm seeing is the cover art, and I will click on things just to see if it's a cool cover art. So that's really good advice.
Yeah.
I kind of wanted to ask a follow-up question because I feel that a lot of artists are wondering about this as far as playlisting. What are your thoughts on that, about using money for like third-party playlists and people who ask for money to get put on playlists? What are your thoughts on that?
I have a one-word answer. Don't.
Why?
So first of all, Spotify is really clear on their terms of service that you should never pay for playlisting. So if somebody is asking for money to add their song to their playlist, or like providing that as like, hey, if you pay us, there's so many of these services popping up all the time now that basically say like, hey, if you pay $50, you'll reach 50,000 people through playlists. Where there's any guarantee, like you need to run far away, report them to Spotify. Like, it's like completely against their terms. So it's really easy to even Google that and, you know, look it up yourself and just say like Spotify's terms of service about, you know, playlisting, or Spotify policy on paid playlisting or whatever. So yeah, there are places which I won't name because I don't recommend using these platforms. But there are places, and there's a lot of them that pop up all the time, but where basically they say, hey, pay a certain amount or buy a certain number of credits, and we'll send your song out to select curators for them to review your song and decide if they want to put it on or not. So it's not a guarantee. But the issue with these platforms is that they they say that they review and like, you know, they're vetting all these playlists, but there are so many playlists on these platforms, they can't really do that. So it's all automated. There's not really a human doing it.
Right.
So it's not completely safe. And I've worked with and talked to many artists who have used these platforms, and unfortunately, like, they got flagged for artificial streams. Their music got taken down. They got kicked off of their distributor platform, like a DistroKid. So, yeah, I would say just be really careful. And the best approach for playlisting is, as far as editorial, you know, Spotify for artists, Amazon Music for artists, you can go on and pitch your song yourself. Obviously, it's not ideal, but you can do that as an independent. And if you have a distributor, more of a boutique distributor, they can do that for you usually. The third-party independent curator side of things, the best bet for you is to do your research and find playlists. And this would be a whole podcast, so I'm not going to go into how to do that. But basically, you develop relationships, make sure the playlist is legit, and develop the relationships yourself and pitch them directly.
Right.
Or work with like a distributor, like somebody you trust that does this, and work with them and basically like hire them for their services. It's similar to like what a radio promoter does, where you pay a radio promoter because they have those relationships with radio stations, and they can pitch your song to them. So you're paying for that service versus you're paying a radio station to play your song. So that's the difference. So yeah, maybe we can do another episode talking about things to look for when you're looking at playlists. So yeah.
That's good. Should we move to the next one? Okay. Question number 2. I feel torn between making music as an act of worship and seeking enough compensation to keep creating. Given that worship is my main motive, should I just take it on the chin and keep giving, which is fine? Or is there clear, conscious ways to allow people to support the creativity without me getting distracted by sales?
This is a really, really good question.
Yeah.
And I can relate to that because I actually started, a lot of people don't know, because I'm surprised when people are surprised when they find out like I lead worship. And I've been leading worship since 1999, and I used to do Christian hip hop back in the day too.
Right.
At the same time.
I've heard some of the rap songs.
Oh, anyway. So I can relate to that because I was getting into like leading worship, but then I had this like artist thing. I wasn't like seriously trying to be an artist, but I was using it as like a ministry tool. And I've worked with artists really since that time because I worked at a nonprofit, and part of my job was hiring artists and worship leaders to come lead at our events. And I've seen a lot of controversy around this, where especially if you do worship music, people, Christians, I don't think non-Christians really have an issue with this about Christians, but Christians tend to, some Christians have an issue with worship leaders, artists getting paid to do things. And if you think about it, a worship leader that does itinerant ministry, like going out and leading worship at places, maybe they do a night of worship, and maybe they write songs, and this is how they support themselves and their family. There's actually a verse, Luke 10:7, I believe. It says, the worker is worthy of their wages. And people use this when they talk about pastors. But when it comes to itinerant ministry, you know, somebody going out, like, and I'm not just talking about people in local churches, but like people that you may hear on the radio, or, you know, that maybe household names that are doing this on the road, they have to be able to support their families through what they do because they're doing this full time. And for us to say, well, you shouldn't make money from worship music, or you shouldn't be paid to come lead worship. The one side of me that like when I see that on YouTube videos and stuff, my side of me that's probably not like the godly side, the flesh wants to go on there and be like, hey, I'm just curious, what do you do for a living? You know,
Right.
what full-time job do you
Right.
have? And maybe they say like, I'm a tax preparer. I don't know.
Tax preparer.
I would be
I'm a
like,
tax collector.
would you do that for free?
Right.
And
if
do
you
it
had a
full time?
family, yeah.
Because I think what happened in our genre and you know, Christendom or whatever is we've turned the word worship into a genre, into like a subgenre in Christian music. And so when you put the label worship on something, we see it as a genre. Whereas biblically, the word worship, like our lifestyle is supposed to be worship.
Yeah.
We are supposed to be worship.
Mm-hmm.
And everything we do is supposed to be worship. I mean, it says whether you eat or drink or whatever you do, do it for the glory of God.
Yeah.
And that means if you're preparing taxes for somebody or you're pulling tooth out on somebody, that should be your act of worship.
Yeah.
So if a worship leader is going out and leading worship and that's their act of worship and we're saying, no, you shouldn't be paid for that, that's like me saying to my Christian doctor, I don't know if my doctor's Christian, but, and saying like, hey, you shouldn't charge me for seeing me and helping me.
Right.
Because you're a Christian. This should be your act of worship, you know?
That'd be crazy.
So that's the first thing. I think you have to get over the criticism and just, you know, the issue with social media these days. I love and hate social media for this reason is like we have so many keyboard warriors that live in their mom's basement and they just like go off on people.
Yeah.
There are a lot of like holier than thou Christians that like live in, you know, anonymity and they can hide behind their phone or their computer and just blast other Christians.
Yeah.
That's not kingdom, you know, like that doesn't glorify God. So I would say just ignore those people, you know?
Seriously.
And I mean, I've seen crazy comments, like one video I was working, I was a part of, like putting it out and like marketing, the guy that was singing the worship song in this like live recording was wearing a hat and we shot it in an old chapel. And there was a comment saying like, hey, it looks like you guys are at church. You shouldn't be wearing a hat as a worship leader. And yeah, I'm going to get off my soapbox about that now. But really, I think the main thing that you're accountable for is your heart.
100%.
And what is your heart posture in it?
Right.
Are you in it to make money and get famous and get rich? Or are you in it to serve people?
Yeah.
And because God's called you to do this. So I think that really matters a lot, even though we don't really talk about that much, especially in this industry. And I would say it's okay. And also it's good for you to ask people to be a part of what you're doing. So, like I mentioned, I used to work for a nonprofit. So right out of high school, I worked for an organization called Youth for Christ, and I was in charge of like putting on events, and I was basically considered a home missionary. I was in California and I was raising my own support. And one thing I learned from our executive director is you don't ask for money as a missionary and, you know, basically like beg people to support you. What you want to do, and like the way you want to approach it is you're inviting people to be a part of what God's doing. So that's how you want to approach it with your music, is you invite people to be a part of what God's doing through your music, and people that really believe in it and want to support it, they'll come alongside you and support you. And there is this like difference between inviting and begging or asking, and they can kind of turn people off when you're like begging people for money on social media or like through emails or whatever.
Yeah.
Because that does come across selfish, and it's really about you versus if you're inviting people to be a part of like the ministry that God's entrusted you with.
Yeah.
It's about the people that you're serving, and people get to be a part of that. And, you know, there's ways to do that where you're kind of really partnering them on this journey, and they get to see the behind the scenes of like this many people came and this many people heard the gospel at my event or through my music. This many people, you know, heard these songs. So that's really like the approach I would take with it. And tying to that, I would also look into maybe starting a nonprofit, or they, you know, the technical term is like a 501c3
right.
status with the IRS. And basically that allows you to function as a nonprofit ministry, and people can support you, like send you donations, and basically they get a tax write-off. So there's benefits to being a nonprofit. I'm not a tax preparer, so ask your tax person about that and whether you should or should not. I'm not giving tax advice or anything. I think the last thing, which we really don't talk about a lot in this industry, is accountability. I think if you are any kind of like public figure or somebody on a platform, you need to make sure you have accountability.
Right. Especially
when it comes to you utilizing people's finances to do ministry or do your work. There needs to be accountability. Right. There needs to be people around you that you trust, and they have good character, and they are business savvy, and they are going to call you out on things if you're, you know, veering off, or doing things that are like unbiblical or whatever, you know. So I think accountability is this like lost value, I would say, right. Biblical value. That's so important that we're really lacking in this industry with artists. And so that would be my encouragement. You could have been asking a totally different question because it was a very short question, but this is my interpretation of your question.
Right.
So, yeah, do you have any thoughts?
I definitely agree about the accountability. I think oftentimes as Christians, I've found we can seek accountability once you've fallen short, or like after the fact. And I think it's so important to really instill that in relationships, in work environments, and all of it ahead of time. Because I think it's just coming to the reality of our humanity, and that we are going to be tempted and we're not Jesus. And so it's so important when those temptations come that we have somebody that can hold us accountable, that can like double check, or someone we can even just be like, hey, this is what's going on. And so I think that's really important. And what you were saying about the heart posture is so, so important, because the worship comes from our heart. And so I totally agree. And I think there's going to be times too with all of us, no matter what we're doing, we're going to do something for free, you know, because we feel the Lord asking us to, and that's for like our tithe. And I think I heard one of my friends say this, and I never had heard it because I've only thought about tithing in regards to 10% of your paycheck. But I had a friend who was a songwriter, and she wasn't making a lot of money. And she just even described her tithe to the Lord is that, like, she would ask the Lord what songs were just for him. And maybe it was like her favorite song. She's like, I refuse to release it or give it to anybody. Like, this song is just for the Lord. And so there's going to be moments as a worship leader where you're going to lead at a church, or you're going to lead for an event that they don't have the finances to pay you. And that's your tithe, you know, that's something you feel called to by the Lord. But I think it's important in the other areas to advocate for yourself, you know, and that takes boldness and courage to not shrink back and to know what you're worth. And because I think we've seen in some people reaching out about our artists and having the finances to pay for it, or certain events where they're charging for a fee to get in, but they're not paying the artists. And it just can get kind of sketchy. So you have to really advocate for yourself and put up those boundaries to say, hey, like, this is my livelihood. Hey, I'm driving 2 hours to this event.
Yeah.
Like, can you compensate for those things? And that's not wrong, and it's not sinful, and it doesn't mean what you're doing isn't worship. Just the same way as if I show up to work all week, like, it's not going to be sin for me to ask to be paid for that.
Well, you get paid for it?
Yes. So I think that's really great. And I think it's important just in everyone, no matter what your work environment is, to check your heart always.
Yeah, that's really good. I think ultimately I look at it through the lens of honor. Like, are you, as somebody putting on an event or whatever, honoring people that are putting the work into it, the laborer.
Right.
So if you're honoring the laborer and you have a small budget and that artist wants to bless you and maybe, part of their ministry and like offering to the Lord is doing your event for almost nothing, or like it's costing them something to be there. I don't think there's anything wrong with that as long as like everybody's honoring each other 100%. And also obviously honoring the Lord. But yeah, I think what you said is like really helpful, and I'm glad you shared your perspective on things because, I think that ministry aspect, you never want to lose that.
Right.
Of like, hey, sometimes God does call us to do things as a sacrifice,
Right.
So.
Right. All right. Question number 3. How can I, as an aspiring Christian music artist, grow as a worship leader?
I feel like this we could probably both speak into also.
Yeah.
Man, I think it's interesting. 2 questions about worship leaders like pursuing artistry. I do think the roles can be complementary to each other because being a worship leader, it's helpful because you're on stage probably every Sunday, in front of people, and you have to learn the skill of engaging, the people that you're serving.
Yeah.
And like the fact that you get to do that every week, that's a blessing. And that you get to like practice that, every week. And like, hopefully you have a pastor and like leadership that you trust, and, you have mutual respect, and they can give you feedback. So it helps you grow and improve. So I think you have a huge benefit in being a worship leader if you're on staff or even a volunteer, and you get to do it regularly, because what you learn from that can transfer over to you being an artist. Because a lot of artists nowadays, they tend to focus a lot on social media, but then like they don't really know what to do when they're on stage, and how to engage people. And that's so important as an artist. That's kind of like the lost art these days. Whereas, when I was growing up and listening to music, I could not follow any artist on any kind of platform. The only time I saw them was in a music video they put out or live at a concert. And so live was so important. And so, I think that's really great that you have that. I would say to go along with that is, if you have the gift in music, I think it's really awesome to like serve at your local church, even if you're not on staff. And even if you're not a worship artist, quote unquote, let's say you do like pop or something, like the fact that you are plugged into a local church and serving is going back to the heart posture and like, really like staying pure with pure motives, accountability, like that really is built in when you are regularly serving at your church without compensation, you know? So even if you're a full-time musician, artist, I think it's really important to like get plugged into a church. And even if it's not on the worship team on stage, like go serve in kids ministry, like do something that helps you stay grounded, So I think the important thing, even with accountability and being an artist, is humility.
Yes.
And I've had a lot of conversations recently, interestingly enough, about how like so many artists do tend to struggle with ego and pride, because that's an easy like backdoor that the enemy can sneak into, because you're literally in the spotlight all the time,
Right.
and you're literally having to record content with your face in it like all the time. So
Yeah.
I think humility is so important to remain, humble, and to remain pure in your motives. And like it's easy, I think, over time to start to like lose your why. So I think like staying grounded and like, and the accountability part too is asking your pastor or people around you to help you stay humble and check in on you on that,
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. I think like specifically if you're asking how to grow as a worship leader, personally, I'm still trying to figure that out myself because I lead at my church on Sunday mornings, and that has been such a sweet gift. And I think it's literally just staying connected to Jesus and getting on your face. And I think what makes leading worship is just so important to be unified. And like you were saying, to be humble. And so that's just not something you can strive for or create in our own flesh. Or like you could be an incredible musician and practiced all the songs and know it all well, but to be unified as a team means humility and means being submitted to the Holy Spirit and being submitted to one another. Because I think as an artist, you're the main person and you get to call the shots, and you have to be more aware of certain things. And even if you're a Christian music artist, it's still about Jesus, but you are writing some of these songs. And so I think it just kind of is a different world. And so I think, yes, it is important. I think it's just learning to submit to one another, because as a worship leader, it's not about what you want and about what you think is best. It's about what Jesus thinks is best, and submitting to that and asking Jesus, what does the church need to hear? And how can we be unified as a team in every single person, like even the person running lyrics? And so a lot of my church does spontaneous worship, and that is terrifying because you really have to be united as a team, and you really have to be submitted to the Holy Spirit to be able to know what He's wanting to do in a room. And so I think it's just the humility aspect and being in the Word and spending time with the Lord and just being submitted to one another. Because I think what can really inhibit worship is when people are trying to have their moment on the stage, and when God's trying to do something and everyone's trying to do something on top of each other, and they're really not even making space. Because the band, like the worship band at my church, like they even say like make room for the electric guitarist or the drummist, because like he might have a solo that's prophetic or for the team or something, from the Lord. And so I think it's just getting outside of the box of what we think worship has to look like and being submitted to the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
That's my thoughts.
That's awesome. I've never heard of the word drummist. I think you invented that word.
It's a new word, guys.
Hey, drummist. Welcome to the podcast. The last thing I would say about that is find a mentor that can really guide you. Like, I think in the different church movements over the past couple of decades, I've seen this shift away from valuing older worship leaders. It's kind of like one of those sad things where a lot of churches, once you turn gray or like once you hit like your 50s, they basically replace you with a hip 20-year-old worship leader.
Dang. Honor your elders.
Yeah. And I think maybe for some older worship leaders, it's a different season for them where they aren't on staff or whatever. But I think even if that does happen at your church, you can still honor them and value them. If you're the one stepping in to go like, hey, would you go out to breakfast with me once a week or once a month and pour into me, And I think there's something really special about having a mentor that has walked that road ahead of you 20 years more than you have. You know, you may not have the same style and same taste in music and stuff like that, but there's a lot of like maturity and experience you can learn from and glean from.
Right.
So that would be my closing thought on that. And I know we have a couple of questions, but I'm going to actually end this with one last question for this episode. We're going to save the other questions for next time.
Sorry, guys.
And I have a question for you.
Oh, I'm scared.
What are some lessons or things you've learned working in this industry now for a little over a year?
Okay. I think I'm learning how to have boundaries. I'm still learning. I think probably everything I'm about to say is things I'm actively asking the Lord for. And I had talked with someone at my church about having healthy boundaries. I mean, I think this applies to anything, but I think with the music industry, something that interests me so much is that there's endless things to do and opportunities and things to learn and grow in. There's always something, and that's exciting, but also it makes it difficult sometimes to figure out like how to put up boundaries. And I know we've had conversations about this where like I've noticed certain people that I even look up to that aren't resting, you know, and how important that is to rest with the Lord, you know, that He's our good shepherd. He makes us lie down in green pastures. And it's so important, especially in the Christian music industry, especially when we're trying to be the outliers. Like we can't be constantly striving. And I think that's just what I'm learning as I'm trying to be a young professional and trying to grow in the industry and in the music business and learn. There's this eagerness to just like keep working. And I think the Lord has been really convicting me that I haven't been inviting Him in. I've just been like, no, I just need to work an extra hour and like strive a little bit harder. When in reality, what would be best is for me to take my lunch break and just spend it with the Lord and like rest in Him and trust that what we're actually looking for and what I'm needing and what our artists are needing is not me to do better, but they need the Lord, you know? So I think I'm learning, I'm not Jesus, how to give myself grace and how to have healthy boundaries, because there's it's Psalm something. I can't remember, but it's the boundary lines have fallen for me in pleasant places. I think it's Psalm 16:6. But the boundary lines have fallen for me in pleasant places. I have a beautiful inheritance. And I've never thought about that scripture in the way that I have recently of just like, Lord, help me to have healthy boundaries in just my relationships with people, in the time I'm working and the striving, and help me to trust that you can do what I can't and to go to you first because I'm not you, you know? And I think that's definitely the second thing I'm learning right now is I'm not Jesus. I'm not a savior. And we have so many artists that I'm so blessed to know and work with and love to encourage, and they're confiding in us, and I just believe in them so much. I just want to I'm going to be the one to like help them and do everything. But it's like, we can't control the algorithm and we can't control numbers. And that's not what I want. And that's not what they need from us. You know, like they need someone who's going to help them, uplift them, and then point them to Jesus. And so I think I'm just learning where's my place, and then where to put up a boundary and be like, no, that's Jesus's place. And I'm just going to be like, I'm just going to pray and ask the Lord to do His will. And so that, and I think just having grace for myself and learning that His grace is sufficient and it's His grace working in me. And these are all very spiritual things, but they apply. And because I'm still learning, and it's a big industry and there's so much. And so I'm learning to give myself grace. And I guess like the last thing that could be a practical thing is I'm learning about communication. And the last year working with you, I think I've learned so much about the importance of
what not to do.
Yeah. Just like different things, like communicating with you as far as just being like, hey, this is just because I think a lot of issues that we've even seen have come from assumptions and miscommunication, or things being held on or not spoken about between artists, between it could be anywhere. And so I think it's really easy to assume and to be afraid to like actually communicate when it could just be a small issue and it turned way bigger. So I think I've been incredibly encouraged being able to communicate with you. And I know it's pretty rare that as a boss, most people are not able to like communicate. Or you're not, like most bosses are not like asking their coworkers like how they're doing and like what's going on and what's going well and what's not. So I appreciate that you check in that way. But I think it's just learning to communicate of like, hey, this is what I'm struggling in, and this is how, like, this is what I'm thinking about this, or maybe even like, this is what I'm thinking you're thinking. Like, is that true? And I think that just solves a lot of issues. And then I'm learning too, like when I over commit to something that I'm actually not capable of, being able to be humble and communicate with our artists like, hey, I'm really sorry. I'm not like able to meet that need at the time I said, but like I'm working on it, you know, instead of just not saying anything and not communicating. And so.
And then they make assumptions.
Yeah, they make assumptions and they're like, hey, where you at? And I'm like, I'm so sorry. So it's a lot and it's really exciting. Growing though.
Yeah.
Growing a lot.
I was actually telling somebody the other day that I try personally to take the approach when I have assumptions or like maybe I heard something or saw something that made me go, man, is this person mad at me or whatever it might be, to actually like approach it with curiosity, which means I'm asking a question versus like
just attacking them.
Making a statement and like accusing them of something.
Like just being like, hey, is this what you're thinking or is this what you're feeling?
Yeah,
like
I mean, a lot of times, I don't know if you've noticed, but a lot of times I'll start a sentence by saying, hey, I'm just curious.
I didn't notice that.
Yeah, so I have, certain things that I do.
That's so smart.
Yeah, some things I share publicly, some things I don't.
Right.
Yeah, it's just my secret weapon. But also, one comment I wanted to like respond to about boundaries that you said, which is really important because there's a whole book on boundaries. I think that's like highly recommended. I think it's Henry Cloud is the author.
Maybe I should read that.
Yeah. Yeah, I actually haven't read it. I think I actually bought the book, but I haven't read it yet. But a lot of people recommend that book to be able to have healthy conversations, even with like family members about boundaries. And some of what you're saying, in some ways, I actually see the opposite problem with a lot of people that I've worked with and work with, which is a lack of work ethic.
Ooh, I'm such a hard worker. Did you guys hear that?
And I mean, I was actually listening to an interview. This like CEO was talking about how basically the interviewer was asking the CEO, what's something you hear in interviews that basically, like this is not a good fit?
Uh-oh.
And
They're like,
said,
my weakness is that I'm just such a hard worker.
The CEO said, when they basically say, how can you, or like, how do you handle work-life balance, at your company? And the CEO, she said, yeah, if they ask that question, they're basically out. Like, they're not a good fit.
Why?
Because she said, work-life balance is not my job. It's your job.
Oh, yeah. That's true.
Yeah. And the whole boundary thing, I think, ties into the whole balance thing.
Right.
And I've also interviewed a lot of people over, a couple of decades of hiring people where that was kind of like their main obsession and like goal is to have this like perfect balance.
Yeah.
And having boundaries or, things like that. But it was really, at the core of it, it was a lack of work ethic.
Yeah.
And I see that a lot actually with people that, whether it's like in the corporate world or church ministry or in the music industry, artists, I think there's work ethic is so important. I've like done videos on this on my social media, just like harping on work ethic and also at the same time not striving.
Right.
So I think that's really important to like distinguish.
You're just going to burn out.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's really awesome. Like what you share, I think that's really applicable. And
thanks.
And also I think it is important for us to be reminded that there is the spiritual aspect of like we have to always rely on God.
Yeah.
And ask for his grace, because there are seasons in our lives where things are crazy and everything's out of balance. And,
right. Yeah.
Boundaries are blurred, but like you have to ask the Lord for grace in that season. And I've experienced personally where God's given me grace in a season where it was so crazy. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I don't know how I'm going to do this, manage all these things. 100%. And God gave me grace for that season. And then when the grace is lifted, you're like, all right, it's done. Yeah. So, thanks, Madyson, for being on this podcast.
This
your
so
debut.
Fun.
Is this your first podcast ever? Or?
Yes. Well, no, I was on my friend's podcast in college.
Oh, okay. So this is your second.
This is my first official music podcast.
Great. You did great.
Hopefully my first of many.
Yeah. We'll talk about that later. So thank you guys for joining. If you want to submit questions, by the time you watch this, I may have announced it publicly, but I'm launching this platform, which is basically a community on Patreon called ChristianCreativeMentorship.com. So if you want to submit questions, go there and you'll be able to submit questions for this podcast. So if you found this helpful and you have your own questions, you can ask questions within the community or submit it for this podcast. So thank you for joining. And, you always have to end these things by saying like, subscribe, comment, leave a review. So do all those things if you feel like it.
Bye, guys.